Hello everyone, it is the 25th of November 2020 and I'm delighted to invite back onto the channel Professor Robert Endres from Imperial College London, who I spoke to in May, pretty much 6 months ago. And you really were one of the main reasons that the YouTube channel took off and I started to interview people like yourself, because you said, contact me on LinkedIn and said, well done for the work that you're doing, because I had really serious concerns about censorship. And I felt you didn't have anywhere to speak. That even really on in the early days, sort of April, May, I found that voices like yours weren't being invited to the table for open debate on the kind of media brands we trusted for so long, like such as the BBC. I thought, well, I've got to obviously give this guy an opportunity to share his thoughts. And it was in relation to Professor Neil Ferguson and the modelling report that was behind the first lockdown. So thank you very much for talking to me again, Robert. Mm-hmm. You're originally from Germany, from Nuremberg, and you live near Reading at the moment. And you've attended a few protests, and you've got a really wonderful insight for us, I think, at the moment, because you've seen what's been going on in Germany and also what's been going on in the UK. And obviously, we don't have a global media channel which can really translate everything that's been going on. So we see a lot of the pictures of the protests in Germany and the legal applications to the government, but we don't have a really good idea of what's going on in Germany. I know you've got a good overview of both. So first of all, why are you doing another interview at this time?
Hi, Anna. Yes, thank you for having me again. So I thought it's quite interesting. So we talked in May, as you said, and a lot of time has passed. And it felt a little bit like, being in a theater play. During intermissions, the curtain goes down and the stage is remodeled. And instead, what, to me at least, what the summer felt like, we were all at home more or less. And then in September, school started and the university started in October. And so it was interesting to see how the summer developed. And also, I mean, it looks like we're in a quite dire situation right now. Our fundamental rights are taken away. Our politicians basically lost all moral compass. It looks like our society seems to be lost in many ways. And so, it's really hard to believe that still people think this is about a virus. There seems to be something much more going on right now. And
you're right. I'm really glad for your honesty. So it's not just a virus. So I know what you mean. And when I interviewed you in May, we were like, we would never have thought in a million years, would we, Rob, that we would be here right now. And we're not being conspiratorial or cynical, are we? Or are we being unnecessarily suspicious? Or is there genuinely something a bit odd going on here?
Yeah, no, I do think. I mean, we can talk about it more. Of course, I mean, some people don't like this kind of discussion because it's so. It sounds like conspiracy theory and so on. But of course, one can also just talk about the facts. What it is. I mean. There's so many issues which are basically wrong right now. It's the key issues, of course, if we wanted to stay on the fact-based discussion, all these measures are not evidence-based. Of course, there are sort of scientific approaches like the PCR test and so on, but how it is being applied, cases being set equal to infections. And of course, then, you test over the summer when no one has respiratory diseases and you test like crazy. And then you get all these false positive, and these things you don't do as a scientist, and you have to be sort of careful about these data and how you apply them. And it's continuous with everything. It's a discussion about the face masks. Since in Germany they're starting having them for school children. There's so many studies coming out now saying face masks don't work, and we know even. You look at the mesh size of the face masks, viruses fly through, and there are also even no requirements. The governments just say. We have to wear a face mask, but if you would really think face masks make any difference, then you would expect there are some specifications, how you have to wear them, what face masks you can wear, and there's nothing about it. So there are always these things, how they counted the deaths. Everyone tested positive and then died within 28 days, was counted as a COVID death and so on. So there was always these things, you can say one thing, you can make a mistake, maybe three things. But since there were so many mistakes, and it's certainly not by accident, I would imagine. You can't make so many mistakes. It's like going like almost on purpose in the wrong direction. Yeah, and of course these things were at the same time. So yeah, exactly.
What I haven't done, Professor Robert Endres from Imperial College London is saying, what are you an authority on? What's your area of expertise for those listening? And you talk about evidence-based decisions. That's kind of your area, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I have a physics background and I work now in biology. In particular, I work at the interface between physics and biology. It's basically about trying to make biology quantitative, to make it a predictive quantitative science. And it's a very useful position to be in. So when you come from the physics side and you approach the biology, you think sort of very minimalistically, you try to find the essence of some phenomenon and you try to describe it, let's say as a modeler in particular. And as it teaches you a lot of things, you know, you wouldn't make a complicated model with 20 or so parameters. And also I'm not an epidemiologist. You wouldn't make a complicated model and then say, oh, if I tweak this one parameter, like social distancing from 1.5 to 2 meters, how many more people would die or something like, or how many less people would die. You would never make a prediction like that if you come from physics, because there's so many parameters, they're so unconstrained, you can't do something like that. You would set a parsimonious model, you would follow Occam's razor, you would start minimalistically. And when you come on the other hand from the biology side and approach this interface, this is called systems biology. And here it's a modern biology discipline. You move away from the traditional reductionistic point of view, where a single gene, a single molecule has some huge important effect. You look at the big thing, sort of emergent phenomena, and this teaches you also a lot because you would say, you know, the whole is more than the parts of the sum of the parts. So you would also be careful, because you would never, in a modern biology discipline like systems biology, you would never say there's a single virus and it's so dangerous it's gonna kill everyone, and then the only solution we have is destroy our economy with a lockdown and have a vaccine and vaccinate everyone on this planet. I mean, you would never make this reductionistic, simplistic. It's a very primitive worldview, and systems biology has taught us not to think that way. And this is sort of where I can come in. I mean, that's, of course, a lot of people can understand it. Any academic with some evidence-based research experience, peer reviewing papers, can tell the difference between good and bad science. So,
and it's hard to just stay calm and talk about the science when you think this just doesn't make any sense. And that's what I keep hearing all the time. This doesn't make any sense. Now, I just want to go back to when you came to me and I felt, you know, I have to use the platforms that I'd grown to give you a voice. But then what's happened really over the last 6 months, Robert, because you know, where I'm at now on the 25th of November, I had Dr. Heike Schöning was arrested. He came to Britain and I met him as he arrived at the protest at Trafalgar Square on the 26th of September. And he tried to speak to us. He tried to talk to us about the work that he's been doing and his concerns. And he ended up being arrested at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. And I shared that on YouTube and I got a strike for it. And just a few days ago, so when you have three strikes on YouTube, you lose your channel. And I'm on 2 at the moment. The second one was for talking about someone called Dr. Roger Hodkinson. And what I said in the video is, let's just check this out. He says his name is Dr. Harkinson. It might not be genuine. Let's just check that this is fake or not fake. That got removed from YouTube and I got another strike. I'm, you know, as much as I'd criticized the BBC in the past, I kind of feel like at least I know where I stand a little bit more with them, because with Google, it's just bizarre that those two, you know, videos. So as much as I want to get your interview out now, and my YouTube restrictions will end in about 9 days, and I will, it's getting really difficult for me to pass this message on to the public. You know, we can't protest. I know you've been to a lot of the protests in London. So one, if you're not allowed to protest, 2, your main media channels are restricted. It's really getting quite tricky. Well, I want to talk to you about Dr. Heike Schöning and what's been going on. You were there at that protest, and did you find out about it? Because for me, I was just like, I can't believe this has happened.
I was at that protest. I was at Trafalgar Square, and actually that was the only time when my whole family went. I mean, the other times I went alone, and so I came with my whole family. And then around 3 o'clock, it was actually before he started speaking. We had to leave for some reason, and that's basically, I think, right before he started speaking, and then he was interrupted, right? I mean, I think that was what was shown on your video. He was starting to speak, and then they turned essentially off the power. So I wasn't there at this moment anymore. And as far as I remember, then, as you know, he went then to the Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park when he was arrested. So I did follow this as well. So there were several recordings on YouTube and including yours on Trafalgar Square. Yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic guy, right? He's just some really honest a doctor, and he founded this movement, doctors speaking out against Corona, and I mean, there's a German name for this movement. And yeah, I mean, he seems like a really guy with a lot of integrity.
Yeah,
And
he on the, you would have seen from my channel and others him being forcibly, basically chucked into the back of a police van. Then he went to Wandsworth police station, was there for 22 hours, and then he came out and gave a talk. And it was citizen journalists on Facebook Live that I found out about this. And again, there was such huge censorship of this, and it just frightened me. But so many things have frightened me, and I'm sure you as well, in what's been going on. It's at ACU 2020 in Germany he's a part of, but there's been a lot of, I've seen the Belgian doctors, I've seen German. And what I would also like to ask you really is, how is this different in Germany? Because you obviously look at the German media and the German academics and the medical professionals, and you've also seen what's happening in the UK. And I know I spoke to someone called Dr. Piers Robinson, who's a propaganda expert, and he was saying that there's more elite dissent in the UK, but there's much more organization in terms of protests in Germany. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, Heike Schöning, to stay with him for another minute. I mean, he founded this investigative panel, basically where different people are being heard, and they basically investigate the lockdown measures, and is this all going scientific? Is it all scientific based, and so on? So there were a lot of sort of panel discussions there also online. And I mean, this is really needed. I mean, the government is not doing it, so he basically decided to do it with some others. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, I always felt in Germany there's more like a sort of a grassroots movement. These protests were huge, and it started in August. The million roughly people in Berlin where Robert F. Kennedy was speaking as well, and this was quite amazing to see. And the previous, the last one, which was quite big, was the one when on 18th of November, when this new so-called enabling law was voted in. It was essentially a new infection protection law. There was one before, it was an update of that. And effectively what happened here is that, these lockdown measures, which were quite vague, I mean, these weren't really laws, they were basically put in law. So there's a whole list of measurements which government can take. And the issue now is that you can't go to court anymore over them, because sometimes before people went to court, and locally, at least in Germany, different areas act differently. They could be taken down, certain measures. That restaurants were closed or things like that. And now technically you can't do it anymore. Also, the new law still effectively violates the constitution, because it's too vague and too general and so on. So technically one could still fight it technically, but so some people see the relationship to the 1933 enabling law, which got the Nazi party to power, and which started the whole disaster. So there are a lot of
terrifying. Is there similarities? Is it being spoken about in Germany? Similarities with what happened in the 1930s?
Yeah, no, there are quite a lot of the different new media channels. They talk about it quite a bit. So there's this very big one by Ken Jebsen, the Ken FM. The channel was taken down with 500,000 subscribers. So it was also taken down now, but I mean, it's still online. There's Rubicon. There are many other channels, and they do discuss it. I mean, it's quite obvious. And there was also this storm of the Bundestag, the parliament, which happened also in 1933. And the media portrayed it sort of the opposite way, that sort of the bad people were storming the parliament. But even in 1933, this were basically the good people who tried to storm it. And then, the government basically took power or stringent measures afterwards. So they used this effectively. So these things, there's these parallels. They're openly debated and discussed here. And openly meaning on the new media. I mean, not in the mainstream news.
So this massive alternative media channel that was very well respected, had 500,000 subscribers. They had a few strikes because some of the material was unlisted, which I've learned a lot about. So if you've got a YouTube channel, even if you unlist the video, it still could cause problems if it breaks their rules. So even though they were remained unlisted, or there were old videos that YouTube didn't like, that was enough of a reason, which is the problem I'm having now. So this 500,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah.
What have they done? They've shifted to a website now, have they?
I mean, it was on a website before, so it's basically run in parallel. So you can always go to the website and look at the videos. It's quite professionally done. And I think they also maybe established some mirror site somewhere else in case someone would go after the server in Germany. But anyway, I mean, it's still available, but you know, it's easier to have this one platform like YouTube. I mean, I also like it, you know, going to YouTube, you have your subscriptions and you can look at the different channels you subscribe to, and it's all on one platform. And now you have to go to various different ones, you know, BitChute, and it makes it harder also. And of course, it's maybe YouTube is also more professional in some way, you know, videos load faster and play better and so on. So
it is challenging. You're right. You have to go. I mean, people talk to me about the Dell Bigtree, the Highwire. Sometimes I'll have a look at that, but why would I? Because it's not sitting there on these, you know, the platforms and the apps that I've got used to. It's been a habit of going to, like you say, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and they're not sitting there anymore. What a crazy time. And you know, this smear of you're a conspiracy theorist, and it's so over the last sort of 6 months since I spoke to you at the beginning, I'd say a lot of people have become more and more suspicious, and they don't want to have that embarrassment of being labeled a conspiracy theorist. But, you know, Sue Cook, who was at the BBC, has a fantastic reputation. She's starting to look at Dell Bigtree on the Highwire with serious concerns about what, you know, the tests and the announcements around Pfizer vaccination. We don't want to be called conspiracy theorists, but we want to know what's going on, Robert. What is going on? What do you think is going on?
I mean, all what we want is basically like how it used to be, effectively a debate. We want alternatives, we want choices. I mean, you know, even if everything would be right, what is happening with these measures, which I really doubt, of course, but even if it were right, you know, why would we have censorship now? Why can't we debate it? Why don't we have a choice? Why are not these 90% of other scientists who have an opinion, which appear in alternative media, who are renowned scientists, why are they not being heard? And of course, that certainly makes you very suspicious. So it feels like, you know, so that's the odd thing. You know, it feels like we have to speak up. Otherwise, you know, what's going to happen in our future? I mean, what is our future going to look like? What does the future of our children look like?
What does our present look like as well? What does our life like right now? What have we lost? You know, the businesses that have gone. It's not just the future. We are suffering now, but you're right, the future. And I'm so worried about the future. You have children, I believe. For my children and my 11-year-old wearing a mask all the time now in Wales. I mean,
if people would know what is happening, I think, I mean, they would run on the street screaming, I think, because what is happening is just outrageous, I think. I don't know how to describe it. I'm surprised that people don't see that more, but, you know, we can discuss this more. I mean, there's of course probably many reasons. It's a very heterogeneous population in some sense. You know, there are people who sort of benefit from the whole thing by being at home with their families and having a nice garden and working from home, and maybe being on furlough or just working beautifully from home, and you know, then there are a lot of other people who maybe have long days, work hard, and then come home and just want to watch some TV and you know, that's their life, and it's also fine. But it's sort of the gray area in between where people have the time, the luxury also to look at alternative news and investigate it. And it's not so easy, right? I mean, you can take the easy way, watch TV and follow that narrative, or you have the luxury and look at it. But if you have the luxury, normally then you might be sort of, in some sense, you know, profiting almost already from it, because as on furlough, you can work from home. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic. You know, why are not people, you know, waking up? I mean, it's hard to understand, but well,
you are what you watch, you know. And sometimes I'll put the BBC on or Sky and think, oh, the vaccine's coming, everything's going to be okay, and it can comfort you, can't it? But if you then go and look at alternative media, you think, no, that all these scientists are being censored. There's clearly not open debates. I think when I hear that the vaccine's not going to be mandatory, then I think, well, that's okay. You know, what do you think about that situation? Because I just want choice. I've always wanted choice and open debates and no censorship. Like you say, I'd be much more inclined to wear a mask if I watched a number of people debating whether they a right thing or the wrong thing. I'd be much more likely to take a vaccine if I saw an open debate with experts talking about pros and the cons, instead of censoring certain voices and
yeah, I mean, it's like yeah, it's like I don't know what to say. I mean, vaccine. I mean, I'm not opposed to vaccines in general. I had vaccinations. My kids had vaccinations. It's just I mean, I know a little bit how it works, right? I mean, we know vaccines take to be approved. It takes the measles vaccine, I think, took only 5 years to approve. Normally more like 10 to 15 years. And there's these different stages, right? I mean, there's a stage of maybe what is it, phase 2 animal testing, phase 3 ultimately goes towards human testing. But now they basically combine the 3 phases into one, and they cut it down to half a year. I think for some of the vaccines, even the animal testing phase was even completely skipped. And no one is outraged about ethical issues that you start essentially testing vaccines on humans. And these are new RNA vaccines, which haven't been tested before. And why are people not suspicious about it? I mean, I don't mind vaccines if it's well tested and if you have the choice. You know, maybe there's some benefits in certain cases, but it also does not make sense to vaccinate billions of people, because you know we all have different backgrounds, not only age but other sort of preconditions potentially. And the vaccine might interfere with certain things. It might interfere with other vaccinations, with other medications. I mean, it's sort of a heterogeneous situation, and having some single-minded, primitive worldview that one vaccine has to apply to everyone, and because some software engineer decided to do so, I just speechless. I don't know why people are not realizing that this is just rubbish.
Well, coming from a communications and media standpoint, because I know a lot about that, it very much is driven by money. The narrative is controlled by money. And I know someone who's a senior virologist at a top UK university has said that they think it takes 3 or 4 years to produce a safe vaccine, but they won't speak out due to funding concerns.
I mean, yeah, the university, of course, now you know, there are a lot of funding is pumped towards into COVID research. So it means, you know, you get quite easily short grants, at least smaller grants, to do some sort of, you know, to take basically some of your research interests and put them towards COVID-19 research. You know, it's basically, you know, buying people almost. You know, you give them money and now they profit from it to some degree additionally. And you know, hopefully they keep quiet, I guess. Of course, these are short-term grants, and you know, you have to think about, you know, what happens in a year and what happens to your future. Everyone has family abroad. I have family in Germany and America. I mean, how are we going to see our families? I mean, how is this going to work? I mean, you know, and you have to think of your kids. I mean, do we want them to be raised in this environment?
Well, I hope as people listen to you, Professor Robert Endres. I mean, you're a professional, you're an academic, you've got a fantastic reputation. And so many people now, like you, are being brave and saying there's something not right. I just hope more people, especially within the media, because I know, because I have insiders at the BBC, come on, we need some real big fight here. Do you think that might be a good solution? Maybe people within these media organizations just starting to protest from within, saying we must fight back here. I mean, you've got politicians dissenting and fighting back, but what's the solution, Robert? What do you think we can do?
I mean, you know, the whole scenario would just disappear overnight. I think, you know, if we just would not follow these rules anymore. I mean, I'm not promoting now, you know, breaking the rules, and I'm not saying, you know, I'm representing anyone here. I'm just speaking as a private person, so I'm not representing now Imperial College, obviously, and I don't want to say, you know, that people break the rules here or the laws, but I mean, I'm a theorist, so I can theorize. Hypothetically speaking, if we would all stop following these rules, or at least sort of a fraction, you know, in biology, you say 10% is small. Let's say, you know, if you're above 10%, 20%, that's already 10 million people. Every 5th person, let's say, if you would stop following these rules across all ages or all professions, from police to academics to any, I mean, then it would just go away, right? Because you can't arrest hundreds of thousands, millions of people. You can't fire them. There would be no risk basically involved anymore. But you know, this is hypothetical, and you know, we have of course laws and so on, so we have to follow these and come up with some legal ways to do it. But you know, hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see such passion and so much dedication from groups like Us for Them and Keep Britain Free and Recovery and Save Our Rights UK. But there's lots and lots of different groups. There's no central coordination. And I think that the protests have had a few problems in the UK. There's been they've been disjointed. I don't think the marketing, it's marketing and strategy and all those kind of things you need. But the grassroots uprising in Germany seems to have been better planned. Like you said, it's believed there were a million people at the protest in Germany in August.
Yeah, maybe it's because of a more protest culture overall. I mean, here, I mean, now, I mean, it gets harder and harder to protest, right? I mean, I think to the last one I went, as it was when I arrived, there was more police and protesters, and you know, it's just scary. I mean, if you can't.
5th of November. It was the 5th of November, the day before the second lockdown. Tell us about that protest. What was it like? I think they called it the Million Mask March or something like that. What was that one like? You said you didn't feel particularly comfortable or safe.
No. I mean, all I want is just basically to be able to voice my opinion how it is in a democracy. I mean, I thought I have this right, and you know, I don't advocate any violence, not at all. But I just went there to show my solidarity, and I arrived. It was in the evening, and you know, there was more police and protesters. Then more protesters came to the eventually, and then there was this march going around. And it was, you know, followed by the police, basically, you know, in riot gear from the beginning, very intimidating. And then in the end, the protest movement went in some side street, you know, moving around to avoid being essentially sort of stopped. And then it was sort of trapped in a little street. You know, the police went around, they blocked the street. It came from behind. Since there were horses and of course riot gear and everything, lots of police cars, and it was very intimidating. I mean, fortunately, I wasn't in the section which was entrapped, but yeah, it's very difficult to even voice your opinion anymore. Yeah, so I mean, that should sort of ring some alarm bells if you can't do this anymore in a democracy. So, you know, I mean, you know, just think about it. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning, you know, this is a modern view of biology and sort of quantitative science. You know, this is what I call systems biology. You know, it's a single virus narrative. You know, it's just so old-fashioned to think like that. You know, just think about it. Basically, you know, it's a human body. We are basically an ecosystem, right? We have 2 to 3 kilograms of bacteria in our body, and mostly in our intestines, to help us digest food and keep our immune system sharp and so on. 2 to 3 kilograms, and this is trillions of cells. It's estimated, I think, that we have 10 times more viruses in as in bacteria cells. So even more viruses. Also, this is less well studied, and a lot of these viruses are actually bacteria viruses, like phages. But nevertheless, you know, think of this complexity. And now picking one virus, which anyway mutates, is not the virus from last year. It's something completely different by now. And then think also about, you know, the immune system, the adaptive immune system is fantastic. It's 500 million years old, you know, and of course viruses were again much older, and human evolution is already 200,000 years old. And so this puts in perspective, you know, what is happening right now. You would, in a modern science discipline, you would not think like that. Or one gene is a key thing, or one virus is a key thing. It just doesn't work like that. So essentially what is happening right now, we're going somewhat back to the dark ages, to literally, I mean this literally, because it's not evidence-based anymore. It's sort of a belief-based system. You know, we talked about that a lot of these measures are sort of questionable anymore. And then, you know, in the beginning, also medical exams were prohibited, medical exams to actually determine the cause of death. That was not allowed because of the virus spreading and so on. But of course, medical exams are 2,000 years old again. It's, I think, invented, essentially started by the Arabs, to see how we can learn from the dead, what the living can learn from the dead. And this is even older. And then in the medieval times as well, there was no safeguarding of kids. Now again, we go back to, you know, how they were painted in these old paintings. Children were essentially little people, painted like little people in terms of proportions. Now again, we go back to these times where we say there's no safeguarding anymore. All these measures invade the school, all these privacy measures, all these face mask measures. All of a sudden, you know, we say, okay, we don't stop even at the schools anymore. So we go back to these old times, which then took the Renaissance, I think, to actually realize, you know, we have to protect the childhood. And so we go back to these hundreds of years, or even longer. I mean, houses, we are basically in a high-tech society, and we go back to the dark ages to some degree. So
I will give my whole life for this, Robert. I've seen my son wearing a mask in the house, and he's got it into habit now. And I don't know that I don't know what I can do other than fight, because I'm a protective mother and I've always put my children first. I didn't go back into full-time job because I thought the most important job is to be a mum, and our most important job as a society, I believe, is to protect our children. And I think they're scared, and I think they're confused, and I think we all are a little bit scared and confused. And I want to thank you for talking to me, and I'm going to do everything I can to get this broadcast shared far and wide, so more and more courageous people like you feel that they are not alone, that there are so many of us, and that we can rise up and we can make a difference. We can join and unite and fight this, because we've got to. I don't think we've got a choice. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I basically, you know, would be really nice to see that academics speak up more, because, you know, you don't have to be a specialist, I think, in a field. You know, we all sit on grant panels where we evaluate grant applications from other people which are not in our area of expertise. We peer review papers, similar scenario. We're not often an expert in these areas, but we can still decide, you know, is this good science or bad science, or may have constructive criticism. And, you know, there's so many biologists, every biologist knows what a PCR test is. You know, I mean, we all know about this. We know what evidence-based science is, and you know, we have to speak out. I mean, it's just really important. And of course, I would like especially academics to say, to voice more their opinions and speak
Absolutely,
up.
and they don't have to come to me either. They've all got Facebook. All they've got to do is pick up their mobile phone and talk for 3 or 4 minutes, and it will be spread. It will be picked up and spread. You don't have to come to me to, like you say, they could speak out on Twitter, on LinkedIn. They can talk. And
yeah, LinkedIn, there's not a lot of that stuff, right? And LinkedIn is quite let's keep it professional. It's about sort of you know, conferences or new products.
Well, I tell you what's professional, Robert. I tell you what's professional is standing up for what is right. That is leadership. That is what's professional. That's what's going to do good for your brand and your reputation going forward, is protecting the vulnerable and standing up for what you believe in, and not pretending to be, oh, I don't want to say that because they're not saying that. I just agree. I think LinkedIn, come on, professionals on LinkedIn, that could make a big difference, couldn't it?
Yeah, it would be really nice. Yeah. It's interesting to see, interesting to see how history repeats itself. You know, we talked about Germany in the 1930s, but I mentioned also, you know, the Dark Ages. You know, Galileo Galilei, one of the first modern scientists, he was promoting this evidence, this observation, you know, that the Earth goes around the sun, the heliocentric worldview, and he was prosecuted by the Roman Catholic Church. In the last 10 years or something like that of his life, he was under house arrest at home. So it was very similar to the quarantine we have right now, the self-isolation. So you see, it's amazing, you know, this was, I don't know, 17th century or something like that. You know, what is happening now? I mean,
well,
why are we going back to the 17th century? I mean,
they're going to be embarrassed. These people on LinkedIn, these academics, these scientists, they're probably going to be very ashamed of themselves, you think? Do you think in the future they could be very embarrassed and ashamed that they didn't do anything?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you know, I of course I interact with a lot of scientists, and I have excellent colleagues at Imperial College. I want to say, you know, this is really important to say. I have very good collaborators, very good people in our department. It's fantastic to work with them. But of course, in meetings we have, and a lot of stuff is now on Teams, you know, online like Zoom and so on. You know, you don't discuss these kind of issues. You know, it's about a project, about some departmental meeting or some other thing or an exam. And you chat a little bit, but you don't even discuss these kind of things. And maybe it's also not the right place, but now you can't mix anymore, right? You can't see them in person. Even if you go on campus, you don't mix anymore. You do your stuff, you one thing you do, and then you go home, and you don't mix and you don't discuss. So yeah, I don't know how it can.
You can't really know what they're thinking. You can't really find out what they're thinking or what's going on.
It's hard to find out. Yeah, it's fine. It's very hard.
Very difficult. Well, there's a challenge to everyone watching this, and Robert, is to be like you, either speak to a channel or a journalist, or, you know, like I said, grab your mobile, do a video on LinkedIn. If you believe that there's important information that needs to come out and needs to be debated. Thank you so much for talking to me, Robert. And, you know, maybe we'll be catching up in 6 months' time. Wonder what would have happened then.
Let's it was an interesting question. Yeah, it's really hard to predict. I think, yeah, it can go either way, I think. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on the channel, Anna.
No, you take care. Really good to see you again. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.